Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am very excited to bring to you Danielle Droitsch. And let me tell you about Danielle. She is an executive and leadership coach who empowers high-achieving professionals to discover their superpowers, love their work, lead with confidence, and achieve the life of a well-being they deserve. She firmly believes that it's possible to love your career. Who'd have thought? Yet a significant portion of the global workforce remains disengaged. 8 years ago, a senior leader at a national nonprofit, Danielle personally experienced burnout and decided that she should overcome this challenge and transformed her outlook and approach to work. Since then, she's helped hundreds of professionals regain confidence and strength in their careers. Many are searching in the wrong places for career success and fulfillment, and often misled by common myths and energized and a feeling that they must uncover the secret sauce. I love that. The secret sauce to feeling successful and energized at work once again. Who has that secret sauce? Every day, she helps people develop strategic plans to accelerate and transform their careers into fulfilling, purposeful, and impactful experiences while prioritizing well-being. So very important. So we're going to talk about a subject that those that tune in know that I love to talk about, and that is, what does authentic leadership actually look like? Please join me in welcoming my guest, Danielle Droitsch. Danielle, so happy to have you on and happy to discuss this topic.
I am thrilled to talk with you about this subject.
So we start with two very easy questions always for you. I always say that, and then people throw me a wrench every now and then. But where do you call home? Where do you currently live?
Well, I guess what I call home is where I'm from, is Washington, D.C. area, but I actually live in Salt Lake City, Utah.
There you go.
In a lot of different places. So home and where I live, and I call both home, but both matter to me.
Same for me. I actually have now lived in Georgia longer than I lived where I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I call both home, though. When I'm there, when I'm here, I refer to that as home. And when I'm there, I refer to this as home. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, exactly.
So I gave a little bit about your journey, but I'd love for my guests to always share about really that backstory. What was that moment or moments in your life that said, I'm getting out of the hamster wheel rat race, and I know that I can help people in another way, and I have a different purpose. And so what is that story for you? What is that journey like?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm thrilled to be here. That journey was a long one for so many of us. There was a moment, and I'll get to it, but for me, it sort of started when I was a little girl, and I've always been sort of a do-gooder trying to save the world. And I would pitch anyone who would listen, which actually ended up helping me when I became an entrepreneur. I didn't realize I had that entrepreneur inside of me. but I became sort of during college, really cared about the environment and protecting it. And so I sort of became very passionate about that and always trying to figure out how to hitch myself to anything that involved, cleaning the water and clearing the air and all those different things. And so I had already been spending a lot of time in the music space and had been a sort of a concert pianist for high school and went to a serious sort of conservatory for that and thought that was going to be my entire career because I was practicing 4 to 5 hours a day and I was competing. And then I was like, but the environment. So I threw myself into that and actually changed my major from a music major to being in this environmental world, eventually became a lawyer and thought that that was it. And it is, it's still a very big passion of mine. I spent 30 years in the space. I created 2 nonprofits. I've worked for a lot of the big national and international organizations, growing as a leader because that was such a passion of mine. And that I felt that that was sort of the thing for me. It was like, that's my mission in life. And so whenever I started to feel a little bit lost, I would just change the subject, like change the interest, like instead of water, maybe focus on forests. And so that's how I sort of changed things. I was changing the knowledge space that I was in. But then I sort of reached a peak in my career where I hit a point where I had risen to a high level. I had a big budget and a team. I was working on a really important campaign. And I was like, gosh, like, why am I feeling like not filled up? It's like, this was the dream. Why is this not filling me up? I did also have a young child at the time. So that was, also sort of contributing. But I really sort of hit that burnout. I was like, this should be filling me up. I should be going to work every day, super enthusiastic, and I'm not. And so I ended up going on a journey. I went I reduced my time and I went on a journey and I did a whole bunch of things. I started to volunteer. I was reading. I was signing up for courses. I spent a lot of time that now I help my clients and a lot less time. But essentially, I realized that I was looking outside myself for the answer. So I was looking at the environment and the world and saying, what does the world need? And that is a good question. I'm not saying that what the world needs isn't a good question because I'm sure many of your listeners and you yourself, you want to make the world a better place. But the answer, the secret sauce, is actually not found outside yourself. It's found inward, which is tricky because you think you know yourself, but then what I've learned and what I learned and what my clients realize is we actually don't know ourselves as well as we think we do. And so the answer to, becoming sort of an authentic leader, engaged and happy is really about that sort of figuring out how we tick. And so my transformation ended up being, I realized in my own process that I'm actually a very good coach. Like I'm very good at helping other people reach their full potential, which once I figured it out, it actually wasn't surprising because I was helping people at work. I was helping my friends. I was always that person who people came to and were asking for advice. But I had never really paid a lot of attention to that because I was really focused on what's the next big thing in the environment to save. And then I realized that it was a big shift. It was a shift from what are the skills and the knowledge that I need to this idea of a personal mission. And that took a little work, but now I will hopefully dig into like, how do you figure that out for yourself? And then my impact grew. I transformed. I feel happier. I was able to create a whole business that has been 6 figures for a number of years. So, and I'm still helping the environment. That's the great news. Like I'm still doing the things that are passionate to me, but passion and purpose aren't necessarily the same thing. So I'll leave it there. That's a bit of my story.
Oh, fantastic. I think one of the first questions that somebody that's listening might say, how do I figure out how to love work? And I think sometimes people, as you're going through your journey, there are going to be times when you don't understand what to do. You don't know how to do things, but eventually you get it. And so you might not love it as you're going on that part of your path. But then when you realize you know what to do, then I think for me in these later years of my life, the the joy of the unknown in discovering is actually what I love sometimes the most about my journey as a leader. So talk about how can the audience figure out how to love work?
That will, and hearing your own reflection, I'm going to come right back to that because a little bit of how you tick just came out. So we all want to love work, don't we? We don't just want to love work, we want to have a positive impact. It's not just about ourselves. When people say, I want to love my work, they're also saying, I just want to make a difference. So when we think about what it means to love work, it isn't usually what we think it is, and that's at least according to the research. So if you just bear with me for a moment, if you go back to the 1940s and 50s and 60s, when people described the idea of work, they would describe that what was important to them, that they had a good job. So that really came down to security, maybe benefits, healthcare. It really wasn't at that time about loving work, but since then, of course, the workforce has changed considerably. Women have entered the workforce, it's become far more diverse. We have many generations working at the same time together. And so when people are asked about work, they're no longer answering that question in the same way. They actually want to love work. They want to love what they do. Yes, we all want security, but most of the, I would say, Generation X all the way to the current generation will say it's really important to love work. So we don't say good job anymore. We say loving work. So what does it mean to love work? Well, if you go back, it would be more about title and it would be more about seniority. And again, not to say that title and seniority don't matter. They definitely matter, but that's not enough. That's not near enough to the word love. So when we talk about love, we mean engagement. So engagement has actually been studied very deeply. There are a lot of different factors of engagement, but ultimately it comes down to a couple of different things. So one of them is I know what's expected of me at work. Another one is I have an opportunity to do what I love every single day. And that's the one I really spend the most time on with my clients. And when I'm talking to your audience here, it's I get an opportunity to love what I do every day. It's not the only thing. Another criteria of engagement is in the last 7 days, I've received recognition or praise for doing good work. Sometimes that's not possible because we don't have a great workplace for that. But there's another one, which is I have a best friend at work. So we have a lot of different ways which is really crucial. And so if there's one thing you can do, you can sort of seek out one other person at work. It will not completely transform your engagement, but it will improve your engagement. Another one is last year, I've had opportunities at work to learn and grow. So there are a couple of these criteria that are within the control of the employee, and there are some that are they're going to be more in control of the employer. And most of the people that come to me is not the employer. It's actually the person at the organization, and they are trying to do it for themselves. So we're not spending a lot of time trying to change this whole organization. I have a lot to say about organizations needing to change, but ultimately those are systemic changes we can't usually change. So what we want to do is get into that zone of what can I change? So a big one is, am I engaged? Am I loving what I do every day? Well, what does it mean to love what you do every day? Well, that's obvious. Well, when you are doing something you're best at every day, it's your strengths. You are exercising your strengths. So when you started to say, I love the unknown, I love discovering, that was an indicator of a strength. I am a Gallup trained strengths coach. So when we deploy the assessment, there are 34 strengths on that result. You don't have to take the Gallup Strength Finder. It's a great Strength Finder assessment, but you can just go and sort of parse them out yourself. You can talk to other people, but ultimately they're not actually, it's not your basic knowledge or even skills. It's not, I know Excel or I know a little bit about this issue. Those matter, and that's what we've been focused on. But when you're mid to senior in your career, it's really about those soft skills, which unfortunately we don't give, we've kind of pushed off to the side. And in fact, that's what employers are looking for. That's what people are looking for. And that's the secret sauce to actually feeling fulfilled. So it's really a big piece of the engagement math is around engaging strengths and then activating them.
That's so true. You know, one of the things that when I used to hire people, I would look at their resume, but I really, the most important piece of that whole process was to meet them, because I asked questions that would inform me as to who they are in terms of what are your values, what are your how do you volunteer, and what do you think of volunteering, and you know what gives you joy, and because all of those things make up your behavior, and I cannot change your behavior.
Yeah.
And I can teach you all of those other things, or I can find someone that can teach you marketing or Excel or whatnot. I cannot change your behavior. You have to be able to do that and recognize the value of that.
Yeah.
So to me, that's where the difference is. And I think that's why you and I do what we do. I mean, that's why I teach changing the way we lead today from when I learned in the 70s and 80s what leadership was all about. It's no longer that way.
Mhm.
And you're right, people are not being taught this. You know, the organizations, and we could spend a whole nother podcast on what priorities of how you benefit your people have shifted, not to the good, in the good way. But that you talked about people, and it was funny. I just did an early Toastmaster meeting with some of my alumni from UPS, and they celebrate 117 years today. And so I said, you know, this thing that was hardest to leave when I retired was not the job. I was a project manager. I left at a very successful point in my career, but it was those relationships that I fostered and built over 27 years. That was the hardest to leave. And and I think that's what people need to understand, that when you get that career, it even though your parents may say, get the job that pays the most, you know, lawyer, doctor, whatever. I had a brother-in-law who was a dentist. He went to do that so he could have Wednesdays off to golf, but also it was a high-paying job, right? He hated that job. And an accident actually was a blessing in disguise, because he cannot use his hands to do the dentistry any longer. And he's doing a bookstore, and he's loving every day. So I love that you say to find that fulfilling thing, find that thing. Don't do the job because it has the high pay return, because you could be spending the next 20 years in a job that is so unfulfilling for you. So
So
why is the workforce so unhappy?
I want to blow my nose. Can we take that pause and then and then you can ask that.
So why is the workforce so unhappy then?
Right. So that's such a good question. So 70% of the workforce are either partly or totally disengaged in their jobs. And that's a really high statistic. And a lot of people say, well, is that COVID or the Great Resignation? Actually, those statistics were already present when COVID started. So we have been seeing these trends for well over a decade, but they're getting worse. And then COVID really worsened that trend because people woke up and sort of started to realize a bunch of things about their roles. So as we go back to the workplace and we're still working through all of that, those numbers are probably not going to change unless we change this key factor of engagement. And so workplaces are grappling with what does it mean to have an engaged workforce, but the employees are too. The workforce is asking themselves these questions. So why do we not have, such a happy workforce? Well, it does come down to what I was saying earlier, is that our priorities have changed. So we do want to love our work, and we have the way the workforce operates is pretty much the same way the workforce has always operated. I mean, there's been some shifts, but not the big fundamental shifts that to keep up with where the workforce has been. So we have sort of traditional, conventional approaches to jobs, which is basically you have a job description and then the employer lays out, here's what you need to do, and then you do that work. That's the conventional approach. But there is now emerging, and it's coming from the employees, although there are some really progressive organizations that are adopting this. And this is, I think, the trend of the future, although who knows how long it's going to take, which is called job crafting. So this idea of an employee crafting their role. Now, it's not changing what needs to get done. I'm not talking about coming in and saying, well, I'm not going to do that responsibility. What I'm saying is that there are basic responsibilities in a job, things that you have to get done, but how you get those things done, we have, especially in the white collar, but I'm not saying this does not apply to blue collar at all. But in the white collar sector, we have considerable flexibility in how we deploy our work on a day-to-day basis, on a minute-by-minute basis. So what we want to do is we want to really be thinking first and foremost about how we can, deploy that work around our strengths, around our interests, around our values. And what happens is that we're bringing our authentic sort of fingerprint, if you will, on the work. And for some people, like it sounds like you are a very big relationship person, like you invest in your employees, you invest in your team, you build those relationships, and you were exercising strengths. And so maybe the way you deployed your work was very around sort of your best self. For other people, it might be they're very big strategic thinkers, and it's all about they're putting their heads into numbers and information, and they're really good at dealing with data or analytical pieces. So what we want to do is really want to figure out where we shine, and we want to lean into that, and we want to spend as much time as possible in those zones of strengths so that we can deploy the best dance. And it's not the same for everyone. So what we're often doing is we're looking at someone else, maybe someone we admire, and we say, ooh, they're really good at that. And then you try to mimic them. And sometimes that works because it's going to feel natural to you. But for so many people, you look at someone else, you try to do what they're doing, and then it doesn't feel right. Now, you may still be good at it. Just because you're good at something does not mean that's where you're strong. That's the big sort of myth. We have to get away from, oh, I'm really good at that. That means that's what I should do. That sort of was my big downfall, is I was good at these things, but I was drained by them. So you really have to look for where you're energized, where you feel strong, and where you're just sort of hitting it out of the park. And that's going to be very personalized to you. So essentially, it's about stopping looking outside yourself and getting really, 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 really familiar with yourself so that you know how you tick best.
I sometimes talk on emotional intelligence, and I just had recently a person who talked about the various different types of intelligence out there. There are several, but in discovering that the self-awareness is a huge piece. And I think that's why, in some ways, I always say that God brought us COVID because it we were going too fast and we needed time to reflect. And I truly believe that, uh, uh, I talk about courage is the first step to confidence, and you do have to have courage. You could be in a career that you thought was the ideal thing, and you've grown, you've changed, and all you out there need to continue to grow and change, and have the courage to say, okay, this journey needs to take a different path, and it's okay. And that's where you see, okay, these are where my strengths and weaknesses are. And recognize, as you did when you were burned out, and know that it's okay to make a change. I think that's one of the things. Give yourself permission to do so.
I couldn't agree more with this idea of courage, because a lot of people that, I'm sure this has happened with you too, like that come to you, they're sort of in a holding pattern. Like they're at a point where they don't know what else to do. They feel stuck. And you're like, you go to work, you have a to-do list, you get the to-do list done. You might even be a high achiever. Like you're actually doing a pretty good job, but you feel like you're not growing. You're not reaching your full potential. You're not happy. You're not fulfilled. Something is not quite right. It's easy to stay there. It's easy to stay there. And yet, is it like a good question to ask yourself is, what's the cost of staying where I am? What's that cost? Because the cost is, there's a big cost. It's, you were talking about, I think your brother-in-law with the dentistry, the cost is not being happy in your role. So it does take a little bit of work to change, and courage, overcoming fears. But there is a path, there is a way to do these changes and to lean in. It doesn't even mean you have to leave your jobs. And what it means is that you do that hard work to figure out how to sort of show up most authentically. For myself, I realized, oh my gosh, like I'm actually someone who would coach and mentor and help others reach their full potential. And I was working on litigation. I was,
Yeah, I was going to say legal. Not at all.
Right. It was not, people were not coming to me about their personal problems at work. That's not what my job was. So I had to, go through a trajectory, and I didn't do everything immediately overnight, but I, built some skills and some knowledge, and I basically made a transition over time to the coaching space. But that was a more drastic change. For some people that I work with, it's really about making shifts and changes in their current career, ideally with their manager support, but not always required, in order to, to really lean in. But it doesn't start with looking outside yourself. I know I've repeated myself, but it's such an important point. It really begins with that introspective look of like who you are and what you're, where you're strong and where you shine and where you feel that energy. And then you shift based on sort of that internal look.
And it's so true. Whenever I first started working, I did 10 years for an accounting firm because I thought I was going to be an accountant, but I couldn't afford to go to college. So I thought, well, I'll work here and then have that, help me pay for college as an accountant. And then I realized after working for 10 years that I didn't ever want to be an accountant. And so I made a pivot to another job, which I loved. And then I had to move with my husband to Georgia. And I made another pivot. But each time I still was at that stage where I was having someone really tell me what to do, how to do it. And it wasn't until I graduated finally from college at 40 or 50 that I said, you know what? I need to be me. And all of these people are telling me how to lead, but whenever I go with my gut, I'm more impactful. I make a difference. And so I no longer cared about what everybody else was telling me how to do it and when to do it and why to do it. I just led by my heart and my gut, and it made all the difference in the world. And yeah, it did take courage because there were still people in your voice, in your head telling you, you're nuts, you shouldn't be doing this, you should follow my way. But then when your teams start to be really high performing, all of a sudden those voices kind of quiet a little bit. Not to say that they still aren't there. So that is, for me, what authentic leadership is trusting your gut, which I think is our smarter brain than our one in our head.
Absolutely. Yes, I couldn't agree more. There's so much, like once you have a sense of sort of what brings you that joy and energy, like we were talking, it sounds like that relationship approach is very, very important. And that was part of your secret sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Then you listen to that. That sort of becomes your piece. I mean, leadership is so different from person to person. I've coached senior vice presidents and executive directors and project managers, and with staff, and they're all showing up like, I've really been good at what I've done, but when it comes to teams or leading people, I feel like a fish out of water. And they're looking at other people, or they're reading a book, or maybe getting some advice. So, there is something really powerful about sort of getting to know yourself and saying, you know what, I'm actually really good in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone's great at just getting in front of a big group of people and giving up, this amazing speech. Some people really lead from behind, servant leadership. Other people are really good at, strategically thinking. You don't have to be the same type of leader as everyone else, but you have to listen, like you say, to your gut in order to understand what your best approach is going to be.
So very true. Well, we could talk for hours.
Yes.
But time has run, and we're going to go show my slide. If you have enjoyed this conversation and really want to delve a little deeper, we're going to share the contact information with Danielle. So if you're just listening, this information will be on my YouTube channel, Vicki Noethling. So please do subscribe, or my findyourleadershipconfidence.com. So the website is wellbeing.com, timeforwellbeing.com. On Facebook, you can just search Danielle Droitsch. That's Droitsch. On LinkedIn is her name as well, Danielle Droitsch. And Instagram, her name, so you can thank her later for all that. I'm going to turn it over to Danielle. She's going to tell you what you can find whenever you go to her website, any resources, links that she has out there to some tools, some insights, as well as any social media she spends the most time. So if you wanted to DM her, she would get back with you right away. So Danielle, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Vicki. Yeah, so you can find me best on LinkedIn and DM me there. I'm always open, always on there posting. I have a lot of resources I post into LinkedIn on a pretty frequent basis. On my website, I have a free, basically it's a mini workbook, and it's basically 8 questions that you want to answer for career clarity. A lot of people are feeling adrift or lost in their career. They don't know what their purpose is. These questions are drafted based on many years of coaching, and you can download it, a free workbook on my website. And that is it. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to chat with you today.
So Danielle, so great chatting with you. I love your topic, and I think everything you shared today was impactful and important for the audience to hear. And I do hope that they'll visit you on LinkedIn as well as your website. And thanks for being such an awesome guest.
Thank you, Vicki. So appreciate being here.
As always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling, signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.